Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episode, and this is very important for us. It's especially on climate change economics. We have our world famous speaker, Mr. Ben Banerjee, Mr. Rob, Madam Durga Das, and Mr. James Eid. So I want to start from Mr. Ben Banerjee, that how do you want to analyze climate change economics, what we can do together for solving this climate change related problem.
Oh, climate change has become very, very interesting. I don't know if you guys have been following the last week's news. There was a legal case in Netherlands where a couple of organizations filed a case against Shell, and they won it. So this is the first time that the judge made two comments which are really which sets up a precedence in our field. One is that although Shell is not a signatory of the climate change, Shell is a major petroleum company, but still the judge had that they're responsible and they have to take enough actions to mitigate for climate change. Plus, whatever voluntary action Shell had committed to was not accepted. They have to reduce their CO2 emission with 45%. And it is not only valid for Shell in Netherlands, it's valid for Shell worldwide. That means in 70 countries, more than 1,100 daughter companies. That's one precedence. The second precedence what the judge did is till now, all the petroleum companies which have been held responsible or which have been sued against has been for the damages they have caused. For example, oil spill, forest fire, chemical spill, whatever. This is the first time in history, I mean, in the Western countries, I don't know how it's about the other countries, is that the judge holds Shell responsible for the damages which will be caused in the future and the costs that will be caused in the future by climate change. And for that, Shell is mandatorily has to reduce. So in other words, Shell froze all its investment in new energy, new fossil fuel research. Secondly, so this is a global precedence. I don't know if you followed Mark Carney, who is the former governor of Bank of England. He gave a very nice speech on CNN where he said, this should be a wake-up call for all fossil fuel companies. Those who are doing good, who are following the right policies, they will have profit, they will give more value to their shareholders, and they will have support for the community. Those who are not going to do it, they are going to end up with massive amount of stranded assets, and they will lose their value. So these are very, very positive impact. You see that now more and more people are using the legal pathway to hold the governments and major corporations responsible for climate change, including the case which happened in United Kingdom, which they won. Many young people, they filed the case against the Prime Minister of UK and the governor to confirming them for the climate change, and they won. And this also started, of course, from Netherlands in 2019 when few kids filed a case against the government and they won, where they forced the government to revise its policies on climate change. So it doesn't matter where you see this is kind of precedence is being set. Climate change is going to impact every angle of economic activities. Mm-hmm. So thank you. I'll just start from there.
Yes. Mr. Rob. So how do you want to analyze the impact and economic aspects? And you are expert on technology. So what we can do?
Yeah, so the holding companies accountable for the damage they're doing is really the first major step to fixing these things. ExxonMobil here in the United States also had an event this last week where a number of the key shareholders forced them to adopt a much more climate-friendly status as well. And it does look like we may have a trend between the geographies. Climate change is impacting adversely a whole bunch of stuff. There are 22 areas of the economy that are impacted. They include agriculture, infrastructure, human health and productivity, tourism, business and financial markets. Anyway, and then there's a tremendous opportunity to come up with things that offset climate change. CO2 scrubbers. There are industries to capture out of climate change, maybe just regular protecting the environment, capture ocean-borne plastics. These efforts to clean up the world have monetary advantages to them, and those are starting to increase. And of course, we have the offsetting technologies like solar, wind, all growing rather impressively. In fact, there have been some tremendous breakthroughs on the solar side of late, giving much higher potential yields as soon as they can make it into panels, which is starting to depress me a little bit because I just bought a big solar plant for my house. But but anyway, the efforts to cause companies that are causing damage to pay for that damage, and the efforts to monetize repairing the damage that's been done are both having a huge impact on the economy.
Thank you. Madam Durgadas, you are also solving climate change problem. Even water is a major challenges in India and South Asia. So what the economical analysis you want to share with us? Madam, can you unmute, please?
Sorry. Good evening, everybody. I think from an Indian perspective, climate change is much spoken about, but not much is being done on the ground. It's unfortunate because the combination of the vast population of 1.3 billion people, a vast majority of which are, under the poverty level and or otherwise poor, and whose first focus is survival. So they're not participating in what will happen tomorrow. They're more concerned about what do I do now. And so there is a big disconnect in saying there's a huge population. We really need to look at climate change. But then when you find that more than 60-70% of the population isn't worried about tomorrow, they're worried about surviving today, then you do find obviously the bigger industries and the government at large are torn between managing these people who are sometimes part of their workforce, and also trying to deal with climate change, because those are restrictions that are coming from, let's say, the government that is participating in international discussions, and so they have to reflect some action on the ground. So there is a disconnect. So there's a lot of talk, but very little being done per se, from what I've observed. Having said that, from a water point of view, obviously there's a lot being addressed simply because there is a crisis. There is a demand for water, and they can't survive without water. So the government is, I would say, rather than looking at polluting the air and forcing electric vehicles or telling industries not to, treat their the gas that is polluting the air before releasing it. I think rather than focusing on such things, they're looking more from how they can focus with industry on releasing, the garbage and chemicals into our water system. They're looking at what we can do to restore our lakes and rivers. So I think that has been the primary focus, and it's in alignment a little bit with what I do for a living, because that's my passion, and to try to work on water and getting our water resources back within our control as best as possible. So there's a lot of activity. Again, it's not just government. It's at the state level, national and state level. We're also doing things within organizations. The Pollution Control Board of every state, and the National Pollution Control Board, which monitors hospitality, monitors industry, monitors business, and monitors homes and construction. They're also putting their foot down, and we are working closely with them. And we can clearly see that they're very motivated to doing something. And of course, last but not least, charitable organizations like the Rotary and others have made this mission this year. And I know while it's an international topic, in India, they have made this a very, very committed action committee. I'm happy that I'm part of that committee as well. And so I know what they're planning on internally. And it's very, very satisfying to know that they are making serious attempts at finding solutions.
Thank you. Mr. Jamsid, so how do you want to analyze the economical aspect on climate change?
Thank you, Sharif, and hello to my guests, my panelists, friends, Ben, Rob, and Didi. I am honored always to be here and to discuss these important topics, because these are global problems and it takes global solutions. So, but I can talk a little bit about the effect on the United States where I live. But I say these are global problems, but you have to start solving them with yourself. Make little changes to yourself. And yes, we have government intervention, policy decisions, and all of these things are important. But I think you begin with yourself first and do the little things. And don't give in to despair. I'm just one person. What difference does it make? Well, one person, you know, if James Eade invests $1,000 in fossil fuel companies or doesn't, it's not really a big deal. But if a million James Eads takes the $1,000 out of the fossil fuel industry, that will get their attention. So start with yourselves. You know, yes, you can put pressure on your government not to subsidize fossil fuel industries, but you could also think of it, what can I do myself? I can, you know, change my portfolio if I have one, so that I'm not investing in fossil fuels and that I am investing in green technologies, appropriate technologies wherever they are. So I can do a lot by myself, although I am reminded every day that one person can't make a great difference by themselves. But if you do yourself and you inspire others to change, then it grows. And all of a sudden, a lot of people are doing what you're doing. And when that happens, you see change, societal change. So I want to inspire everyone to do their part individually, and also to put pressure on your governments to do their part. You know, put those energies, and I'm inspired to hear the legal progress that we're making. And, you know, we have in the United States a tremendous problem with climate change deniers and people that get elected because they appeal to their base, which are climate change deniers. And so we have trouble getting policy through that is consistent with reality. The climate is changing. But we have a lot of people who want to pretend it is not, to live in the past rather than to take action against what's coming to us in the future. And it's inevitably coming. And pretending that it won't come is a recipe for disaster. And that's what we're facing. We're on the cusp of disaster. So we have to take action, and we have to take action yesterday. And if we can't take action yesterday because it's in the past, take action today. Do what you can today. And all of these things, there are technological solutions, but we can't rely on technology. There are policy solutions, but we can't rely on policy. All of these things have to happen together, all across the globe. We have to be pulling all the oars in the same direction if we're going to pass on to future generations a world that is sustainable and livable. And yes, water is the source of life. So if water is life, why make it a scarce property? So you can charge more for it? So you can make profit off of it? This is wrong-headed thinking. Water should be in abundance. And if you're thinking about what can I do? I'm just starting out in life. What can I do? Well, maybe your talents lie in water purification systems. Then maybe your career should be in something like that, something that will help solve these global problems, because we all have talents, we all have weaknesses. So play to your strengths. Whatever you're good at, do it, but do it with a global prospect in mind, not just a selfish one, not how much money I can have in the bank, not how many cars I can own. These are things that are living in a land of delusion, because the reality is we're in this together. Thanks very much, Sharif. And I think Sharif has lost contact with us. And so, Ben, do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, I was just, while you all were talking, I was writing down 5 points. I think since we have very, very limited time, so I'll just go through it very quickly, and then I'd love to hear all your opinion on it. One is when we talk about climate change and all that, we seem to somehow forget the hidden subsidies, which is really a big issue. We have more than 4 trillion hidden subsidy, as to my knowledge, I may be wrong, in fossil fuel. Then we have the hidden subsidy in a very wrong agriculture methods. These are 2 very big, how do you say it in English, bull in China shop or something, which nobody seems to talk about. Everybody talks about 50 billion here or 20 billion here in the renewable energy, and the whole world starts screaming, or at least the whole country starts screaming, but they forget that there is trillions in subsidy in the fossil fuel. My second point was what Madam Durgadas mentioned, is disconnect. But I think the disconnect is not only in countries like India, but it's very much present in the Western world. I can speak on behalf of the European Union. Majority, if you look at Germany, majority of the civilians are against fossil fuel, but the government is going ahead with coal power stations and diesel. Same, I was reading somewhere in a report, I don't know if it's correct, that 60 or 70% plus Republican young youths or Republican, how do you call it, Gen Z, are for investment in renewable energy. But if you listen to the Republican leaders, nobody seems to have any idea what is renewable energy. So there is a massive disconnect between what the people want and what the political leadership is deciding. My third point was that climate change, I think it started in US and now it has blown over to the whole Europe, is that people have started associating climate change with politics. So anytime you speak about climate change, even now in Switzerland, I was surprised on 13th, we have a referendum on CO2 laws. Anything, if you say for CO2 restriction, is left. Even in posters, they are saying this is a left-wing, leftist, left extremistic ideas. So suddenly, climate change and environment has become assigned to left-wing politics, while in fact, climate change has nothing to do with left or right-wing. So this is a very dangerous trend I see, which your former president started, with aligning everything with climate change with left-wing extremism, and now it has blown over also to Europe. My fourth point would be the climate injustice. I think that is another bull in the China shop that nobody's talking about, that the people who make the least impact to the climate change or with the CO2 emission, everything, are one of the people who are going to be the hardest, or not going to be, but already are being the hardest hit. Whether you take Bangladesh, whether you take India, all this, they have per capita the least or the lowest, one of the lowest CO2 emissions. So there is a massive question of climate injustice, and I don't know how this will be worked, but this will only create worse situation from both sides. And my last point, which I wanted to mention, is the tipping point, because this I spoke also earlier, that we human have a capacity of thinking linear, that everything is as planned and everything moves in linear. Unfortunately, nature does not. Nature moves with tipping points. And same is for economics. Economics also has a tendency not of moving linear, but it also has tipping points where it crashes. And we have seen it. That's why none of the economists could predict the financial crises we hit into, whether in the end of 90s and 2007 and all that. So these are the 5 points. I just wanted to throw it because of the limited time. And then would love to hear all your opinions on these 5 points.
Thank you. Mr. Rob.
So as we look at the economics of climate change, the very real problem is that climate change is being caused by industries that aren't paying the cost of that climate change, and they want to maintain that profit margin. The money does move governments, and sadly, there's an awful lot of money on the petrochemical side of things, and certainly there's a lot of money that goes towards not dealing with pollution because it results in profits to the companies that are polluting. Generally, what happens is the pollution reaches a point where it starts to do serious damage to the populace, and then you get a major backlash, often way too late to fix the underlying problems. And initially, of course, we saw them regionally. Disasters from mining for gold, for instance, in California were significant, wiping out entire ecosystems because of the methods being used. Eventually, that industry was shut down, but not after doing a whole lot of damage. And the petrochemical industry was flagged way back in the 1920s and 30s as likely to create a massive problem, and that we should avoid it. But even back then, Shell oil was so powerful that they were able to suppress the information. And as Ben argued, this really isn't a left or right issue. What makes it left or right is the petrochemical companies tend to fund the right, at least here in the United States, and the right a conservative party tends to be a party of no change. You have conservative views. You want things to stay the same, and clearly reacting to climate change is change. So I guess that's what caused the gravitational movement of the oil companies to support the right. But in any case, if you're going to try to address this problem, you have to do it in a number of phases. One of them is to remove the economics surrounding the bad behavior, and has been pointed out. Providing subsidies to polluting organizations as opposed to charging them for the damage they do is just increasing the rate of the damage and doing a great deal of harm. I mean, here in Oregon and over in California, we pretty much wiped out a couple of fairly good-sized forests just from climate change. And looking across the country, a good chunk of the country is underwater. and a good chunk of the country doesn't have enough. And so those major changes are causing farms to fail. New Mexico just had a report last week about New Mexico farmers that are starting to abandon farming. California farmers and Oregon farmers are facing those same kinds of issues because they can't get the water to raise the crops, or the water is so expensive that they can't afford to farm. And by the way, that's on top of the fact that farms themselves tend to be some of the highest polluters of water because of the practices they have. I used to be into farming. It was kind of an embarrassment to go back and realize that we were doing as much damage as we were doing. But in any case, the fix is to align the political leaders with the overall effort of preserving the climate. And this really shouldn't be all that difficult. We are causing damage now at a unprecedented rate. We're setting a high temperature marks on a fairly regular basis now, and we're watching these huge glaciers that are on land right now fail and flow into the ocean, which is going to cause the ocean to rise, and that in and of itself is going to cause billions of dollars worth of damage and may render some places like New Orleans unlivable over time, since it's already below sea level. So the outcome is dire. The potential benefits, really near term, I have less confidence in the efforts to globally fix this problem, and certainly none of us here on this panel have that kind of power. But it does mean there's certain kinds of industries are going to have to come up fairly quickly, and those are the industries that mitigate climate change, protections against flooding, finding ways to correct or protect against fires. It still boggles my mind that both in California and Oregon, we're still, when we rebuild the houses that are burnt by fire in areas that are prone to fire, we're still using wood. So those houses are going to burn down again, and so the efforts to 3D printing houses, using different materials so the houses can sustain the fire. Those will also have positive economic impacts on the industries that promote and bring it forward. We actually, surprisingly, in the United States, we've had a whole bunch of new companies pop up that are building homes that could better survive higher winds, better survive fires, and the rest. And really adopting to climate change is probably where most folks are going to find the best near-term profit, as well as alternative energy sources.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Madam Durgadas. Can you unmute, please?
I'm sorry, I keep muting myself to make sure I don't disturb the others while they speak. Like I just to continue on the same vein of what I was discussing about an India perspective. I think one of the things I realized is, the panic that the COVID-19 situation has brought about in people here, where I actually see people who would be not so open to change, to being careful, to being hygienic, things like that. I find that many people, including the poorest of poor, are wearing a mask nowadays. They are afraid of one thing, death. I think that's one thing that can make anyone change. So maybe it's just a thought in my mind, but one of the things I thought is, why not use this situation of COVID-19 and the fear of death, actually share and create awareness on what climate change will do, right? Because if we say climate change, it sounds too big for the common man here. But if you tell them that the temperature is going up by a couple of degrees, you will get waterborne diseases. Just like COVID-19, you're going to get the next one, 2021, another virus outbreak, possibly death right outside your door. Connecting COVID to the possibility of a climate change action that is also going to be similar to COVID might bring change, might bring awareness, right? Because frankly, climate change will make that happen. Water resources will dry up, they will get polluted. The increase in temperature will create problems in agriculture. Waterborne diseases, airborne diseases are all going to be very, very prevalent with climate change. So maybe we need to kind of piggyback on COVID-19 a little bit to get the message across, because the more we talk about big words like climate change that don't mean anything to the vast majority, right? I think we need to think a little differently about how we create that message.
Mr. Jamsit.
Yes, thank you, Sharif. And one of the things that and part of changing that message is that the rate of change has accelerated and it continues to accelerate. And for most of the lives of our ancestors, the grandparents and grandchildren lived pretty much the same lives, and that is no longer the case. It started with the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, and it has continued to accelerate. We no longer live in an industrial society. We live in a post-industrial society, and the rate of change has doubled every blink of the eye, it seems sometimes. I can remember back in the 1990s, people would come up to me and say, I want to get into programming, and everyone tells me to learn COBOL programming language. And I would say COBOL is the language of the past. The language of the future will be internet oriented. Learn Java, learn something that is about the future. But mine was a lonely voice back then, but it turned out to be correct, because all of a sudden, if you start out and you're newly trying to get a job and you're a COBOL programmer and there are fewer COBOL programming jobs, and there are plenty of people with years of COBOL programming experience, you're not going to compete with them. So you have to look for the future. What are the future opportunities? And you have to prepare yourself. And don't wait to be taught. Train yourself. These are the messages that I want to send. Train yourself. Take charge of your life. And make yourself useful for what's going to happen in the future, because the pace of change is so fast now. I can hold up my iPhone and I tell you, the mainframes that I used to work on did not have this processing power. They did not have this memory storage. These were the most powerful machines that IBM produced, and they're nothing compared to what I can hold in my hand today. So we can't predict with precision the future, of course not, but we can make educated guesses. And we can prepare ourselves for the future environment. That's the primary message I want to get. Change yourself, change your community, and who knows where it will end. But these are global problems that are global solutions, and we have to take multifaceted approaches to solving them. And this includes governmental policies. Stop the subsidies of fossil fuels. And what these divisions between left and right, what has that got to do with it? Unfortunately, it does. It's the reality, because they're playing to their base. And so we have to change the minds of people. But, it's very difficult when the powerful voices are telling them one thing, because the sources of information now are not trying to inform, they're trying to persuade. And so this is something else that we have to change. We have to get more. There's too much data out there. We can't possibly process it all, but we have to have people that are trying to skim it down so that it's information that can inform us instead of this persuasion. And because if you have this bias, you will find it. If you look for it, you will get confirmation of your bias. So we want some objectivity, some science behind our policies. And these are the things that we have to do starting yesterday, but it's too late about yesterday, so we'll have to try today. Thank you very much, Sharif.
Thank you. Mr. Ben, one thing in my mind always I try to understand from the grassroots level people, because when we're discussing about climate change, developing nations, 90% people actually involved with the micro initiative, different small business and other things. But if we just try to analyze this factor like sustainable development as well as climate change, we do not find they have clear understanding about this climate change impact. And so how we actually solve this problem when main extreme peoples like different kind of small companies, small organizations, and small medium enterprise, they do not have enough engagement with these climate change issues, sustainability issues. So how do we solve this problem? What do you think? Is it practically possible?
I think that's exactly what you're doing. Programs like yours is the one which is making the awareness, because people have to. There's no other, I don't think there's an easy way out of this. I know people are feeling it, and people like in Bangladesh or India or Africa, there's a massive desertification, desalinization going on, but they still do not in their mind. Many people still do not couple it, or they know about it, but they don't know. I think the problem much bigger, even this exists in the Western. I mean, I can speak for EU. everybody talks about climate change. Everybody is aware about it, but nobody's aware about these small little things, what they can do, what James just mentioned, that these. I also want to do something for climate action, but if you ask me, Ben, what can you do, I would have no idea, because there is somehow either massive overdose of information or complete lack of information, and added to it comes social media and all the things. So I think it's a matter of what you are doing to bring the information, the knowledge out to everybody. That's the only way out.
No, we also face a lot of challenges, because in developing nations, when we discuss about climate change, example with different business organization, business forum, government, even government forums, and we do not get actually really good response, even though we are observing the prime minister from developing nations, USA president's office, and European Union's top guys, we are discussing. But when we try to implement the policy, as well as, because without awareness, how we can do this? And I can mention even many big organizations, still they are not involved. They have, let's say, they have 5,000 employees, but still they are not involved with the sustainability, climate change issues. I think from United Nations, as well as the big organizations like you and other, you actually really contributing a lot on this climate change issues. We have to get reached to the grassroots level people with different activities like this kind of campaign, or we have to find out the creative solutions based on different cultures. And I think this is ultimately one of the major problem we are facing right now. So Mr. Rob, so what are your observations? We want to know more about US economy and US culture.
Oh, we're nuts here. Yeah, so in any case, the last month, the president did outline a significant effort to try to determine the causes, where the federal government should place its money, what it should do with subsidies. But in our split party system with everybody balanced, it's proving rather difficult to make any significant changes. We're kind of the country of the status quo, regardless of what's going on around us. So the which is not a good thing. But there are some industries that are coming up that at least look like they can mitigate some of the damage. One of the big concerns, of course, is the loss of large areas of arable land. That's being mitigated by warehouse farms. That technology is advancing rather dramatically, and even if there wasn't climate change, the warehouse farms pollute a lot less than regular farms do. They're much more efficient. They make better use of the land, better use of the underlying resources. And other than the fact that farmers don't like change any more than anybody else does, they appear to be much better in terms of bringing food production closer to food consumption. A lot of the cost in agriculture is transport. And so they address that by putting the food creation much nearer the people that are going to consume it. Quality is much more consistent. As I mentioned, costs are lower. And of course, transport also generates carbon dioxide and exacerbates the overall climate problem. The other industries that appear to be growing fairly significantly, alternative energy industries, seem to be doing pretty good. We still have a fairly significant problem with regard to electricity storage. That's a technology problem. And really, it's the result of going decades without doing a lot of really meaningful work into creating new batteries and new types of energy storage. We started fixing that a couple decades back, largely for things like laptops and smartphones. But those efforts are now starting to bear fruit. We're getting some better yields out of things like supercapacitors and ultracapacitors, and being able to solve the leakage problem. Calling certain things solid state batteries are coming, though frankly some of the biggest efforts with regard to energy storage are still dealing with using things like gravity, deep mine shafts where you're pumping water up and down or moving weights up and down, seem to be the most efficient way still to store energy, and that's kind of problematic in and of itself. In the end, it really comes down to driving a need. I mean, if you look at certain things, back to agriculture and farming, beef, that industry produces an inordinate amount of methane gas. The fixes are stop eating beef. going to some kind of a factory-produced meat, which is not only better for the ecology, it's probably a ton better for your mindset. I'm not a big fan of killing animals if you don't have to, and that's just it's an unfortunate practice we've got ourselves on with a lot of animals. We're actually suppressing their intelligence or the analysis of their intelligence because we don't want to feel badly about the food we eat. On the other hand, if we solve a bunch of problems, so we can move to alternatives that aren't doing as much damage and are far more humane. I fundamentally think just that would make us better people if we went in that direction, regardless of the climate impact. But in the end, everybody should know the top 2 or 3 things in their nation that are causing greenhouse gases and be doing their best to contain their consumption of them. Beef and pet and fuel would be the 2 that would be at the top of my own personal list, and doing everything you can to mitigate your consumption. And then as you're looking for careers in areas that are creating alternatives. The manufactured food industry is still fairly young, and it's using positive methods, and the potential for doing things like 3D printing food is increasing every year. And we should have viable food 3D printers, at least at an industrial scale, across a number of food sources other than just beef by the end of the decade. And that's interesting. One, it's as climate change continues, we're going to need those sources to keep people fed. But in most cases, they're also not only far cleaner, they're also far safer. Mad cow disease isn't going to get introduced into that particular food chain. And we have had that issue, of course, with our own food chain. And look what the climate's doing to the herds. We're going to have some serious problems with regard to people trying to sneak in sick beef, and so it does mean that food quality is probably going to. Well, so we've already seen it suffer in some areas as different pathogens made it into our food supply chain on several times and been covered up and not found out until later. So coming up with a better food. Practices that don't pollute, and a lifestyle that is much less about consumption and more about conservation. All of that stuff is beneficial for the world that we're trying to build.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Madam Durgadas. Mm-hmm.
Muted.
Yes, got it. One point that I think Rob mentioned a little while ago was rewarding people who would help mitigate climate change rather than punish those who are creating or contributing to the issues of climate change. I really find that an interesting concept because, there's nothing like, when you looked at India, you looked at China, as governments wanted to bring business to the countries and increase our, foreign reserves. One thing they did do was created, exemptions, whether it was tax or paying for electricity, or subsidies that they created to make sure that we created enough opportunity to bring money into the country in manufacturing or the technology industry as well, creating software technology parks, giving land at a very low cost, any number of things. I think that is actually one way to have industry sit up and say, okay, I want to contribute, right? And I think that will truly make a difference. And I think the government has done things in the, like bringing in committed 2% for CSR activity, which every company over a certain profit limit has to contribute either to the Prime Minister Cares Fund or to any project that they can do that can be under the approval of the CSR banner. And that has helped a lot. I know the CSR budget in India is now a little over 50,000 crores. And you can do the math, 7 crores is $1 million, right? And so if you just that math itself is like what, $700 million or 7,000, $7 billion dollars is what that fund is, and that goes towards causes for water, for education, for empowering the girl child, for sanitation. These are the kind of projects that they are empowered to do, and they have to submit a project report saying that they've done it. So I think along the same lines, if we did start saying there will be rewards if industry contributes to mitigating the effects of climate change, I think there would be a definite difference. The other point that has been discussed is food, beef. Yes, because of water and being in water, I know that the industry of beef as a staple food is taking huge resources of water, huge. It's like a burger could be like 6,000 glasses of water, for example, right? And so I think from an Indian perspective, again, the fact that we are not big beef eaters, we actually it's against the philosophy of Hinduism. We do have Christians who eat beef, but that's a small section of our population. There's a small section of big, I would say, a fairly large section of Muslims where we do not have pork, and a large section of the Indian population relies on a vegetarian diet. Even if they do have a little bit of non-vegetarian, it's never it's never the main course. It's always something on the side. You have rice, bread, vegetables, dals, like lentils. That's the main source of food for most Indians. So I think yeah, we have created enough pollution and contamination and damage to climate change because of other reasons. But at least in the case of food, I think we have because as a culture we have more driven towards vegetarianism. I think we have not contributed as badly. So there is there's always a good and a bad to every country. One of the things I realized was the effects of climate change will affect specific countries, mostly in the Asian region, older people, younger children. The effects of climate change specifically go after low-lying areas, people near closer to the latitudes, right? And so I think if we look at those countries and those regions, I think the onus of responsibility lies with the wealthier countries to lead the change, to make the change, to support those who can't even afford to begin to think beyond survival. And so it cannot no longer be just talk. It has to translate into what can I do. I think COVID has taught us all that we're a collective species. We're not all doing our own thing and disappearing behind walls. During this time, we have closed our walls, not allowed air travel, but we can't live like that forever, right? And so we have to realize that as a population, we're all interconnected, and interconnected beyond the internet, interconnected in every single way, the way we think, the way we feel, our energy levels, everything, what we do here affects somebody down the line somewhere else. And I think if we make that, that understanding clear, then I think we should have people come together, and this has to happen with policy change. This has to happen with government. It's too big a problem to expect each individual to say, okay, what is it I can do? Because there are little things I can do. For water, for example, I go to a community of 500 homes and I tell them, just put an aerator, you'll save some water. And that's millions of liters of water, and they'll do it. It's a small contribution of 200-300 rupees to put an aerator on every tap, but it makes a difference. Right? I can do rainwater harvesting in community. It doesn't cost a whole lot of money, a couple of $1,000s, but it makes a whole lot of difference. When it comes to the larger effects of climate change, it's not the individual that can make a huge difference. It has to come from top down. Government, large industry has to put their foot out there, and that can only happen, like we discussed, with benefits by giving them the carrot instead of the stick.
Mr. Jamsit, I think Madam Durga does come up with many interesting information from Asian perspective. So
yes, I agree. And Didi had to mention walls just when I changed my background. So I was going to go on my walls little riff there, but it's too late now. But we are interconnected in a way that we were not in the past. And that is one of the messages that we want to get out. And I do think, the top down versus bottom up, I think that dualism is not necessary. I think both are necessary. I think you have to have grassroots movements. You have to have pressure from the bottom up, and you have to have the wealthiest and the ones with the most resources change their behavior. It has to be from the top down as well. Without one, the other will not be enough. This is the crisis that we face. We're not in a situation where we can postpone decision making. The day to make these decisions is yesterday, but we don't have yesterday. We only have today. So what can we do today? Start with yourself. Change what you're doing today. And I'm aware that I'm in a wealthy country that and I talk about, I have solar panels on my house, and I can hear people say, I wish I had a house. I say I have an electric car, and I hear people say, I can hear them say, I wish I had a bicycle. So, I have to be aware not to be too arrogant in saying what you can do for yourself. But with the risk of that, I will say that if you are investing, if you are in the top 1%, and your investment portfolio does not include a company like, and I'm going to pick on Beyond Meat, then you're not doing your part. If you're investing in Shell, you're not doing your part. So it does start with every individual, but not one individual can make the difference. It has to be a lot of individuals, but a lot of individuals can change society. And that's what we have to do. We have to change society. It starts with the top, but it also starts with the bottom. The grassroots movements have to put pressure on the top before the top will be willing to change. Because if I can hide behind my walls and if I can keep you out, I will. And so we have to put some pressure on them, so make them a little uncomfortable and realize that this is going to affect them no matter what safeguards they put in place. Then they will change their behavior before it is too late for our children, too late for our children's children. And I've done some research on the global effects of where can I live in the United States? And I did it from in terms of 2030, which I have reasonable expectation to see, and 2050, where I have reasonable expectation that my nieces and nephews will see. And there's a big difference. But I tell you, the southern Midwest, it's not pretty. Coastal states, it's not pretty. So the idea that, two of my favorite cities in the United States are San Francisco and New York, and they're not the places to be in 2050. Where can you go? Well, Rob's lucky. The Pacific Northwest is probably going to do okay. New England's probably going to do okay. The upper Midwest might be the best. What do they have? They have the Great Lakes. They have pretty much a given water supply. And water is going to be more and more precious as this climate change continues. And when I say it continues, it doesn't gradually get worse. It gets worse at a escalating rate. It's not arithmetic progression, it's geometric progression, and it gets bad suddenly. Until all of our resources and energies may not be enough to reverse it. So a little bit of resource and energy today in prevention will be much smaller price to pay than all of the energy resources that will take to reverse the damage we've already done in the future. So invest today in prevention. And what can you do to start the reversal? And, train yourself when you're young. Train yourself. Don't wait to be taught. Train yourself to have the skill set that's going to be needed in 2030. And you'll be ahead of the game, and there'll be jobs for you. Thanks very much, Sharif.
Thank you. Mr. Rob, what is your advice to get rich to the grassroots level people? Because if we're discussing about climate change, economical aspects, technology, modern science, engineering, we have to get rich to this millions of people, those who are actually untouched. So what is your advice how we can get engaged with this kind of communities and people?
Sorry, when you say engaged with these kind of communities and people, be a bit more clear.
Engagements, like example, from our perspective, let's say World Talent Economy Forums, we are organizing this kind of program. Why? Because we want to create the real knowledge for our community, for the Asian community, for Asia Pacific people. Second things, when we do survey, we engage with the people because we have our another school of talent economy. So we provide our content 100% free. Let's say we are discussing on climate change economics. So we take class individually, what is climate change economy. So we have to get involved with the student. We have to get involved with the local community, policymaker, corporations. So we find that actually there are maybe highest 10% of the people has engagement with modern science, engineering, and technology. We can give you many like evidence on that particular points. So our objective, we want to get involved with more communities. So how we can engage with them with utilizing internet and other platform. What is your advice actually
Well,
for get engaged?
bring on board a marketing expert, a current generation marketing expert. I mean, that's what you're describing as a marketing problem. So what you need is somebody to focus on marketing out to the communities, and you need an expert not only on the tools they'll need to market at those communities, but those communities themselves, because you have to be able to understand the community you're marketing to understand to know which methods work best, which modes work best. I mean, are they really on the internet, or are you going to have to use something else to get in touch? But if you're trying to communicate with a community and carry a message, that's a traditional marketing role, and the people that are professional in those roles understand the community and understand the tools are the ones that can help you out. And you can either hire one or you can rent them by using an agency. And then picking an agency that knows the environment. But what you're describing is a marketing problem, and thus it requires a marketing solution.
Thank you. I just want to share for our audience, because we have School of Talent Economy, because we do two-way. Number one, like regular class. We take class in YouTube channel, and it's 100% free. There are huge content. If you want, you can utilize for your learnings and everything. Any of the student, even regularly we are communicating with different education institutions. As in the COVID-19 situation, many schools student dropouts, and many of them cannot actually go to the schools properly, so they can utilizing our content, because whatever our panelists actually discussing, we are developing our classroom. And this kind of session also important because from the different perspective, different kind of people from different organizational things we bring together, and we are trying to engage with more on policy related organization, corporations, and other things. Okay, so I request everyone share our content as much as possible. Like what you want to share, like you want to share with your policymaker, with your corporations, with in between your academia. I'm sure this kind of content is very much helpful. Even in Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, even in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, even Africa, many countries we are distributing right now. So we need more of your support. Everybody here, those who join as a speaker, they also have their own community, so they can share our World Talent Economy Forum content. So this is the way we are actually developing. So Mr. Jamsit, how we can improve? What is your advice?
Well, I will tell you that I've been involved in multiple trusts and foundations, and on their boards, on their operating as their presidents. And I have been less than successful in convincing these people who actually look a lot like me, an older white male, majority of them, and their thinking is older white male thinking. And when you talk even about the internet, they're suspicious. And I can remember advancing the argument that we needed to have online chess playing sites, and people told me that no one would trust their credit card over their internet. So you're going to run into opposition. Take that as a given, but do not let that discourage you. Do not give in to despair. Continue. And one of the things I would say today, you've got to reach out to the youth, and what are the youth listening to? That's how you have to reverse engineer this. Where are they? Don't get them. Don't say, come to me, but go to them. And how is that? Everybody's got a phone. Everybody's got an app. Is it TikTok? I don't know. I'm not part of that generation. I can't tell you. But maybe a TikTok 20 seconds or something like that to get their attention, to tell them where they can get more information. I don't know what else is really popular in the youth today, but that's where they are. Go there. Give an app. Build an app that says climate change or something. I don't know. I'm not a marketing expert, but that's what you have to do. if you want to change the message. And if you want to reach the people you want to reach, go where they are. Don't wait for them to come to where you are. That's old white male thinking. That's just not going to work today. That's not how we're going to change the world. And this is what we're talking about, changing the world.
Mhm.
You know, is it a small thing? No. Can one person do it? No. So we've got to do this together. And the youth have got to be part of the solution. And where are they? How do you find them? Well, hire a marketing expert, like Rob said, somebody that's trained to do this, not somebody like me. What do I know about where the youth are today? I've got some educated guesses, but you know, you're not going to pay me to give you educated guesses. You know, pay somebody that has some some track record, some working knowledge of how to reach the youth of today and how you can inspire them to change, not just to think about, oh, does this boy or girl like me? That sort of stuff. You know, like, what is the planet going to look like when you're my age? You know, and you know what? More likely than not, you're going to become my age, and you're going to have children or nieces and nephews, and you're going to wonder about the world you're passing on to them, because that's what I'm doing now. I'm worried about the world my generation has passed on. I'm not too proud of it. So, you know, don't do what we did. Make a difference. Thanks, Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Madam Durgadas, can you hear me? Okay. I think I want to go for Madam Durgadas. Can you hear me?
On today. Is that
Okay.
welcome
Okay,
to live streaming?
Okay, thank you. We have to go for the concluding remarks for today. I directly want to request Mr. Rob, then Mr. Jamesid. If Madam Durga Das can join, he can give her concluding remarks. Thank you for joining today's sessions. And last summit, I want to say very successful. Many speakers from different countries, they join our 2-day summit, and we will arrange more summit like that. And there are many audience, they request me to arrange this kind of summit because this is very helpful for learning and from different perspective. Even some universities from Malaysia and Singapore, they also want to join in our next summit. So I want to give our honorable speaker, Mr. Rob, Mr. James, Durgadash, everyone, I want to give them a special thanks. And we are preparing your certificates. So we will send you the, just check your name if I do not want to miss it. So soon, one and 2 days, we will forward all of your certificates. And thank you our audience, those who support our World Talent Economy Forum initiative. And second things, that now Malaysia has lockdown, so I request everyone, do not go outside, stay at home, those who are observing from Malaysia, and follow all of the law, rules and regulations. And government also help the local community. They are providing vaccine and everything, so we need to help our government as well from Malaysia. So the youth and everyone, I know it's a very difficult time, but I think it's lockdown, so stay at home. So I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. First, Mr. Rob, and then Mr. Jamsid. Mr. Rob.
So there are two vectors with regard to economic advancement with regard to climate change. One is work on some of the large issues, the food sources, alternatives to fuel. Those kinds of projects can make a huge difference long term. I'm not convinced we have a ton of time for those things to mature anymore, but you are working on the good side, and as we respond to climate change, those industries are going to increase. And then of course you can also work on localized programs, mitigating flooding, buildings that can withstand wind, solar and wind farms. Those kinds of projects on a localized area can at least help your environment better survive the changes that are going to come. And in the end, right now, you need to be looking at global weather maps and trends to determine where you may want to live. There are going to be large areas of the world that are going to be uninhabitable fairly soon. Certainly, if you're into farming, the large areas where the arable land is simply going to decrease. at a massive rate, and the inability to get to food and clean water are going to create problems. A lot of the issues that we have here right now with regard to immigration are climate immigrants that are coming up from Central and South America, where the conditions are fairly dire right now, and trying to move into better climates. But our climate's being impacted here as well, and so if you do have to make that move, you want to move to where it's less likely you're going to have a major climate event, and that means perhaps even farther north than the United States. As I pass our problems on to Canada, I'm sure they'll love it. Anyway, the bottom line though is if there was one area of learning I would encourage you all to do, it's critical thinking. Look at the information you're getting, validate the information you're getting, and then make decisions strategically where you want to live, what you want to do, what industries are likely going to be on the upswing when you graduate, and what areas are going to be the least affected by climate change. You certainly want to stay away from low-lying areas. You want to stay away from areas that are already having water problems, both too much and too little, and find areas that are fairly stable, because those property values are probably going to go up like rockets over the next couple of decades as more and more people seek out those safe havens. So encourage you for critical thinking and for doing strategic planning with both for your career and where you want to live.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Jamsid.
Thank you, Sharif. I just want to say that I think what Rob just said is so important. Critical thinking, and how do you get that? You can wait to be educated, or you can educate yourself. Critical thinking can be developed. You know, it's not a strength in our school systems in the United States. It's not what they teach. So teach yourself. That's the way to do it. Read. You know, books are your friend. They can be your friend. And if you educate yourself, then you're going to be prepared for whatever the future brings. Because it will bring something. We're not entirely sure what it is, but we can make some educated guesses. We can plan. Strategic planning, like Rob said. Hey, that's a thought. Plan strategically. Use critical thinking to make the best decisions. Where am I going to live in 2030? Well, why not buy in 2021? You know, and then in 2030, it's going to have more property value. Hey, what about 2050? Why don't I help my niece buy something where it's going to be valuable in 2050? You know, these are the types of strategic planning that you can do. But you know what? That means a few of us are going to be smart and a few of us are going to survive. What about everybody else? You know, we have to look at them too, because it's not enough for you to survive if the world is shrunken and shriveled and a miserable place to live. You will be shrunken and shriveled and miserable too, no matter what you do. So think about others. Think about how they are going to survive, how they're going to survive and thrive. It's possible. You know, is it likely now after all this time that we've wasted? Maybe not, but it's possible. You can't tell me it isn't. There is a possibility of a future in 2030 that's better than the projections say. It is possible that the future in 2050 is better than the projections say, but not if we do nothing, not if we go about our merry way, pretending everything is going to be fine, because it isn't. And the other thing I would say, I want to retract what I said, you know, when you're young, yeah, you got to care about who, you know, the boys and girls, and you have to have your social life and you have to do those things. Of course, didn't mean to say that that was not normal or not to be done or desirable. But you also want to include in your thinking ahead, plan for the future, because this is how you train yourself to have the skill set that will make you a valuable asset in the future. Don't do, we always used to say this, management 101, the person who says, but we've always done it that way, is the person you got to get rid of, because the way it's always worked is not going to be the way it works in the future. So you've got to be prepared. So whatever the future is, you're nimble enough to adapt to it. So this is my message to you, is don't wait to be taught, teach yourself. Critical thinking, strategic planning, these are critical aspects of the future, because whatever's coming, you've got to be ready for it. You've got to make yourself ready for it. And don't wait to and don't expect anyone else to make you ready. That's your job. Make yourself ready. Own it. And prepare yourself for the future. Sharif, you're doing a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
For
Thank
having
you.
me on.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. Actually, under Al Noor Academy with Asia Research and Development Institute, World Talent Economy Forum, School of Talent Economy, we are doing all of the academic research, training and development, this kind of policy discussions, as well as we provide consulting. So I request everyone, we need all of your support, because we are trying every day, we are trying to get more people from Asia Pacific, and we always getting a lot of support from Mr. Rob, Mr. James Seed, and all of other speakers. I find 300 different speakers from around the world. Last 1 year, they joined World Talent Economy Forum. So I want to give special thanks to our speakers, those who always support World Talent Economy Forum. And beside that, our audience, always they support me from different countries. And we also have to grow our organizations, because there are many people, we need to support them. So we have to go for the fundraising options. If anybody want to donate World Talent Economy Forum, they can donate through PayPal. Our PayPal account, presidentwtforum@gmail.com. I can give you that kind of assurance. We have very dedicated team. So if we get all of your collaborations and partnership and support, hopefully we can change millions of lives. And this is very important, very important. Even today's this 1 hour of discussions, I'm sure it's very helpful for many people in Asia Pacific. Many people, they never think about climate change, they never think about strategic planning, how they so this kind of discussions and collaborations actually help them a lot. So thank you, Mr. Rob, for your continuous support, and Mr. James Seed for your continuous support. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, all of our audience and speakers. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.